Everyone, I'm Amy. I'm the director of Museum Los Gatos, and it's my privilege today to welcome all of you to this special moment, this walkthrough of Terra Firma, a new exhibition curated by Marianne McGrath. So before we dive in, I want to mention that around midway through the walkthrough, we're going to pause for a moment at another very exciting new exhibition project that we've been working on called Reclamation. And it's a partnership with San Jose State University and the Muwekma Ohlone tribe to amplify their current status as a tribe in our area and to talk about the critical issues that they're facing today. And my soon we'll be joined by the Muwekma Ohlone chairwoman, Charlene Nijme, who will just say a few words about that exhibit as well. So it's a twofer. As we dive in, I want to acknowledge all the people and organizations that supported this significant effort. And it's a long list, but it's really important that you know the full breadth of the local, regional, state support that has happened to make all of this possible. So first, of course, I want to thank Marianne, our fabulous guest curator. She's going to share some really great insights about the artists and the work. And of course the talented artists that loan their work for this exhibition. So please raise your hand if you're an artist in Terra Firma. Wonderful, thank you so much. And then Julie Ho-Sung did the graphic design for this exhibition. Julie, are you here? Well, Julie did an awesome job. Yes. So, all right, and then of course we want to thank the Muwekma Ohlone tribe for their collaboration, not only for Reclamation, but also there are words by their chairwoman Monica V. Ariano that you will see. The San Jose State Anthropology faculty and students who worked hard over the many past few months to interview tribal members and help put Reclamation together. So please raise your hand if you're a San Jose State faculty or student. Woohoo! Yes, thank you. Or alumni. Yeah, how about that? San Jose State alumni. Okay. And then Kike Arnall was our fabulous photo documentarian, tribal photographer. Kike, are you here yet? Okay, he'll come later and you can ask him questions. And then, so really it takes a village to make all of this possible. And our board, the New Museum Los Gatos board, helps shape and lead the organization. We have Jan here, our wonderful board chair. Any other board members here today that I somehow missed? Okay, great. Potential board members too, you can also come see me after. Okay, so and then our Art Now Team Council is volunteering today. We have a couple of our Art Now Team Council reps. Raise your hand if you're so this is really exciting. For the first year ever, we have a team council of high school students who are advising us on the next Art Now exhibition, the high school student art exhibition that we have every year, been going on 12 years, so stay tuned for that. And then of course our amazing, stupendous staff. Please raise your hand if you're a staff member of New Museum Los Gatos. Have been working tirelessly to put this all together. So thank you so much for all of your expertise and efforts. So these exhibitions are a testament to what we can achieve in Los Gatos, to show the region that Los Gatos values art, culture, community, history. And I want to just thank some of our sponsors and donors today. So support for Terra Firma is provided by Penumbra, the Robert Lehman Foundation, Mary and Barney Davidge, who many of you know, and the California Arts Council. And then support for the Reclamation exhibit is provided by the Farrington Historical Foundation, which I know we have a couple of you here today. Yes, wonderful, thank you. And SV Creates in partnership with the County of Santa Clara. It's also supported by the California Arts Council and California Humanities, and in-kind support from University Art. And then, of course, we have Kathy Aoki's beautiful show here as well. Don't miss that, and support for that is provided by Borgenicht Foundation and Wanda Kalmackian. Hi, Wanda. Yay, thank you. Okay, so Really, thank you to all of you for filling our museum today with activity, dialogue, and your generous support as a member. So your membership really is the core for our support. It makes it possible to do this, to be here today, to be together, and to celebrate art history and culture and community. So thank you. And so that's enough from me. But please, I will pass the mic to my wonderful friend and colleague, Marianne. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I want to thank Amy, the staff at Numu. I also am so grateful, particularly for Cristiano. Thank you for helping me. And I want to thank all of the artists, because a curator cannot curate without artists. And I am honored and deeply grateful for having the opportunity to share your work with our community. And thank you for being here today, those of you who are here. I appreciate you coming to speak to your work and let people get to know you. So with that, I welcome you to Terra Firma. This is a group show with 15 artists, and together the artists explore our relationship with the land. They explore the poetic and physical nature of the land. And individually, each of the artists explore sub-themes that are relevant and really worthy of your contemplation. So with that, let's get started and we'll start walking through the exhibition. So I'll start over here with Russell Crotty's work in this corner. And Russell Crotty wishes he could be here today. All of the artists who are not here wish they could be here, but Russell Crotty is a California artist. He grew up in San Rafael. He's now in Southern California. He lives in Ojai, and he is passionate about the land. He loves to hike, and even more passionate about the night sky. He's an amateur astrologer, astronomer, I should say. And when you see his work, you'll see accurate depictions of the land that he walks and climbs, and the night sky that he is so keenly observes. And you could probably make, wherever you see a star in here, it's probably accurate with the way it would be in the sky at that location at that time. Russell Crotty creates these landscapes on globes. And they're fiberglass globes. They're covered with archival paper, and he uses special pens and ink pens and colored pencils to create these landscapes. He creates artist books and these panoramic landscapes. And you'll see in the work text, and the text creates both texture and a sense of depth. It gets smaller when it goes away, that's a way to create depth of things. But it's also his, I call it his poetry, but he calls it his rant. But it's the language that comes to him in his response to the land. So when you're looking at his work, be sure to look closely and read the work in both ways, not just with the beauty, but also the text that his dialogue with the land. So let me know if you have any questions along the way. Raise your hand. Now to Narciso Martinez. Narciso lives and works in Long Beach, California, and I love his story. Narciso came here when he was 20. He worked in the fields as a migrant farm worker, along with many of his family members. And he went back to school when he was 20 and finished his high school degree, and then went on to junior college and went and got his BFA and finally his MFA. And in between, he worked in the fields to earn money to put himself through school all along the way. And I so admire his commitment to his education, his commitment to his work, and his commitment to his family and friends and the people he's worked with in the fields. And you'll see he makes his work on found produce boxes. And you'll see the landscape, you'll see portraits of people he knows and has worked with. And they're not romanticized, like you may see sometimes in a landscape with people working, but people shown with their protective clothing on, with masks on. It's harsh work. When I met with him at his studio, he was telling me about his experience, and it's backbreaking, very difficult work, and he hopes through this work that you'll know the people who bring you your food. These are the people who fill our grocery stores, our restaurants, our refrigerators with the food we eat. And so I appreciate him bringing to light the work of the people who work so hard to feed all of us. And I hope that you take time with it and contemplate that too. Anyways, there's Suso. Now I want to move on and have the pleasure of introducing you to Natalia Berg. She's here, and Natalia, I want to welcome you to come speak to this work. Natalia is a local artist. She lives here in San Jose. She exhibits with Jack Fisher Gallery. She recently had a solo show there. And it's a very unique combination of materials here, but I'll leave that to the artists. We're so lucky to hear speak today. So, Natalia.
Okay. Hi. So it's an honor to be part of such a wonderful show. So thank you, Marianne, for doing such a great job. My work is mostly about travel. I love to travel, and it started when I was a little girl going with my father on a train, and I remember like I was mesmerized by the time how one piece of land would move to another. And sometimes, like even traveling right now, I would read the stories what was happening on that land some time ago, and I always felt like we're just a guest who come and go, and this is something which would stay, hopefully, after we will be gone. And so like I started work right there. It's a work on paper, and it's mostly based on my travel experience, in a sense like I would think like what people would come and like what they would bring to the land, like the war, the peace, the struggles, life, and then the more I would develop the series, I kind of move towards the plexiglass and mirrors, and so like if you would stay in the right kind of angle, you would see your reflection right there. And I want the people to be those people which I would paint on the paper and just view yourself on the landscape and kind of be the part of that little grass which I'm trying to create is like very small brushes, and for me it was very important to make the work as detailed as possible. So it's in a way to represent almost like human life. It's us, like who come and go generation after generation. It's almost like the grass which is would grow and hopefully would grow forever. So.
By Shara Mays, and Shara is an open-based artist. She's not here today because she's at another show opening at Jenkins Johnson, so you might want to check out that show as well. Shara creates work that is colorful and lush and abundant. And when we think about the land, we can think about, at least when I was thinking about land with this exhibit, there's deserts and mountains and plains, and this is that thick, overgrown Eden that you sometimes call to mind when we think about the land. And in this work, Shara wants us to think about that kind of almost that abundance, but also kind of the decay. And for her, a lot of times her landscapes are spurred by photographs or memories of the land. And in this case, this piece is, Suri has something to say too. It's based on this photograph of her father in the front yard of where they lived in South Carolina in the 50s. And her family's gathered together, and there's all these kind of trees and growth around them. And everyone seems so safe and happy and secure. But for her, there's also this other aspect to the fact that it really wasn't safe for her family because they're African American, and at that time, being in that place on that land was not a safe place. So that's something she shared about this work, and I'm sharing it with you. I encourage you to just read her quote too, because she says it much more eloquently than I, but Charmaze. Turn to this piece by Sita Shen. I'd like to introduce you to the artist. She's here with us today, all the way from Los Angeles. Yeah, welcome. And I'm so honored to have you in the show, and I'm so happy you're here. I know you've exhibited a lot of places. I know you're about to show work at the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. I'm going to turn it over to you so you can share the way you make this work and how it relates to your family's practice of paper cut. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Marianne, for putting such a wonderful shows. And thank you for everyone who come here today. So my name is Sija Chen, and this is my work, Twin Peaks. It is part of a series called Cross the Water and Climb the Mountains, which was inspired by a traditional Chinese idiom describing a long and challenging trek. The works are reflections of my journey, my personal journey as a first-generation immigrant, and the experience I've shared with many others. And the key element here is paper cut, which, like Marianne said, is a traditional Chinese folk art that has been part of my family's heritage. And instead of continuing the long tradition of red paper, I expanded the medium to include immigration forms, magazine papers, and mom and pop restaurant menus. So through the layerings of content-filled cutouts, my intent was to present complex narratives. And Twin Peaks is very special and significant because it was my early response to the racism and mistreatment directed in Asian community during the pandemic. And Twin Peaks also represents a bridge between my two homes. So the peaks are from two mountain ranges. One from my hometown Shantou in China, the other of the Hollywood Hills, which is the backdrop of my current homes. So my works in general, there are my interpretations about the evolving hardships, virtues, and challenges, and I want to say aspirations that define the immigrant experience of America today, in America today. So I want to say that I think it is an analogy for the American dream during this singular period of our history. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Rupi. I'm so happy you can speak to your work yourself, and I am so excited to have you in the show. I know you recently had solo shows at the Triton and at Jessica Silverman. Your career is just really growing and taking off so wonderfully, and being part of significant collections internationally. So thank you for being part of the show, and I'm going to turn this over to you to speak to your.
Thank you. Thanks, Marianne. I would rather hear Marianne talk about the work, but there's also a really long write-up. Please read that. I like to say I'm like a really joyful artist who likes to paint ugly truths. So that's kind of a disjointed feeling between my work and myself. My work originates from kind of personal histories and family histories of displacement, and this work is part of that series where I use water to relate to land. And I think because as a woman who has grandmothers who've been through the partition of India in 1947, and also as someone who's seen my mom go through immigration, and someone myself who has now finally called Oakland home with my 3 little babies who are under 5, so I'm surprised I'm here. But for me, I think land as a woman is about fluidity, because we seldom don't find land to stand on as women, and our land is constantly shifting and moving. So for me, I use water as that land for myself. these hands within this piece are my way of connecting to the gestures and the silence that I got from my grandmothers, who I never got to talk to, about partition of India and about their loss. And I think even my own mother, where I've seen her hands do a lot of the talking in her life, and I think that's why hands come in as these characters for me in these paintings. I want you to read that seriously, just because this painting specifically is at the end of 6 others, and this kind of culminated that relationship of, and really painful relationship of relating to something that is kind of an ancestral baggage, an ancestral sorrow of loss and tragedy. And I think this painting for me was the kind of the period to that series, because it relates to where I go and the place I go when I meet my ancestors in these really powerful journeys where they lost not only belongings, their sense of homeland, but later I found out it was also both my grandmothers lost babies during the partition. And as someone who has experienced loss of an unborn child, that kind of layered a very painful way of connecting to my grandmothers. And I think one thing that I've inherited from these 2 amazing women is silence, because they never spoke about the tragedy they went through, and I never asked as well. But I feel that silence speaks to some of the silence I felt when I felt loss. So these paintings allow me to have those conversations, but at the same time, as many of you might know, with histories that are painful to kind of touch within our families and within our personal life, when you touch those personal histories and you're trying to depict them in this really beautiful, detailed way, they sometimes lead you to a very hopeless place. Sometimes you discover that the world is such a horrible place, but then it's still a hopeful thing to put them into paintings for me. So this painting specifically is about that. It's a paraphrasing of it. I cannot talk about the work without talking about how I make it. So I'm a traditionally trained artist, trained in the 18th century traditional style of Indian miniature painting, which has a more decolonized name, which I just call traditional Indian painting. And it has nothing to do with size. It's just the British got it wrong when they were labeling that size when they colonized India. And within that traditional style, the brush, the pigments, the grinding of the pigments, making of the pigments, preparing of the paper, detailed painting, burnishing, it's a lot of labor that I put into the work. And even this size of the work is actually something that has been burnished at least 3 times. And if you can imagine me kind of burnishing the paper in the back to smoothen the surface so that I can use that single hair brush that is used to construct the work. And that's how I also carry my twins, because I get really strong arms. But yeah, please ask me questions. I'll be around for as long as my kids will let me stay here. But I'm glad I made this work specifically for the show. I know you wanted something else, but I'm glad this is what I was able to hand over to you.
Well, I wanted what you were going to make. And I know I came to you about a different piece, but I'm so grateful for what we have. And it's beautiful. It's better than what I could have ever hoped for. So thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
This is an installation by Camille Hoffman. Camille Hoffman is a New York-based artist. She was here a few weeks ago to create this just for this exhibition for Numu. Camille creates what she calls accumulated landscapes. And that's what when I first saw her work, that's what I was thinking of was going to have in the show. And after a lot of conversations over a year and a half and Zooms and emails, it turned out that she could come here in person and create this installation. And it was this wonderful coincidence that it was the anniversary, the 435th anniversary of the landing of the first Filipino on the North American continent, near Morro Bay, which is really the Chumash land. And she is half Filipino, and she, in her work, examines identity, memory, place, the role that Manifest Destiny has taken in the development of our landscape and our attitudes towards land. And in this particular piece, Offshore, she is speaking to the labor of the Filipino people that have contributed to the development and the success of the United States or North America first working with the Spanish who had colonized the Philippines, and first working with the Spanish to create and make the ships and man the ships and sail the ships to go to North America, then as agricultural workers to work the land and provide labor, backbreaking labor to work the land, and then now as a really important part of our workforce in the medical field. There are schools, medical schools in the Philippines, the United States, set up to augment our need for medical workers. And a majority of our nursing staff here in the United States is Filipino. So the people in our nursing homes, our hospitals, our doctor's offices are Filipino trained nurses or Filipino descent. And you'll see in this collage of this mural, you'll see a nursing gown, which references that. And something that the artist would really like us to be mindful of is that the Filipino who have come to this land or part of our community here are frontline workers, and they have been one of the most vulnerable communities during the COVID-19 pandemic. So this is a tribute to them and to the people who have traveled from one shore to another across land and are part of our great community here. So I hope you'll take a look at the work, and if you have questions later, let me know.
So, Porsche Tuhi, that is good day in our native Chochenyo language. My name is Charlene Nijme, and I'm the chairwoman for the Muwekma Alumni Tribe. And I'd like to start by thanking the Numu Museum. We greatly appreciate their effort to amplify our voice in this exhibit and bring the visibility of the tribe here in the Bay Area, because we have a long history here, and not everybody knows about this history. So by having this exhibit, it just amplifies our voices and shows that we are still here today, you know, fighting to bring back our culture, our connection to the land, and also fighting for our federal recognition. Because I always say, is without that recognition, we're not going to be able to stay here on our land and live on our land like our ancestors once did, and maintain the land like they did. So it's important, that's one priority of ours, is federal recognition, so that our people can always stay on the land that their ancestors were born on. And we are still here today. And I hope that you enjoy this exhibit. It shows the revitalization of our dances. It was 125 years ago when we last danced. It was in 1890, our Capitan died, and our dance went to sleep. And now our youth are eager, more than eager, to bring back those dances. And that's what we're doing, is bringing the dance and the language back. Thank you. Please enjoy.
So let's continue with Terra Firma. I want to next introduce the work here of Bin Dong. He is a local artist. He's a Vietnamese-American artist. He is a professor at San Jose State, where he went for his undergrad and then on to Stanford for his MFA. He is a photographer, and you'll see here this series of daguerreotypes, which is a really old photographic process that's created on metal. It's, I think, it's copper with silver on top, then it's exposed to mercury. It's part of the process to create the image, and they're actually they're delicate, but they're longer lasting than a photograph on paper. And they're very delicate, you can see a lot of detail, and they're very reflective, which is something that the artist did intentionally, because he wants us to see ourselves in the land. He had seen this special by Ken Burns, you know, the National Park series, and in that series, I forget who the person was, it's in his quote here, but the person being interviewed wanted to point out that for people who immigrate to the United States, or people in the United States who just don't have land, the national parks belong to you. On that arch there from in Yellowstone, it says for the benefit and enjoyment for all. So our public spaces, our public land, even our local parks in town here, that land belongs to people who may not own land. And so that's something that's really meaningful to people who may have not be able to purchase their own land, or they're new to our land, to know that sense of belonging. So I invite you to look at these beautiful portraits of our national parks and to see yourself in the land. And now we're going to move over to this piece here by John Roloff, and I'm going to invite John to speak about his sculpture here. He will say it better than I, but these beautiful works that he creates, this one in particular is a piece that incorporates sediment from the San Francisco Bay and materials from the earth. But John also creates installations, and he's had a long practice. He was a professor at SFAI for many years. And anyways, I'm so thankful that you're here today with us, and I'm going to turn things over to you.
Well, thank you for inviting me for the show and the whole exhibition. It's really wonderful. So this is a ship. I don't know if you can tell, but if you look at the basic shape of it. But it goes back to the mid-70s, the whole line of ships that are an investigation of the landscape in different ways. When I was in college, I was both an art major and a geology major. So, Elbridge Moores was my tectonics teacher. He was the guy that John McPhee interviewed for the Assembly in California, things like that. So this history of the connection between sculpture and in particular ceramics and the landscape has been at the very basis of my work. So as Marianne mentioned, this piece is actually made out of sediment from the bay and fired. The darker stuff is actually iron oxide. It's more but to articulate it. But for a geologist, for a geologic perspective, you think about the clay, but you think about where it came from, which would be the hills, coming down through streams, through erosion. But the hills were also formed by plate tectonics. And so this piece is called it has part of the title of Mount Tehama. Mount Tehama is a mountain that's no longer existing. That was part of the Lassen, part of the Cascade Range that goes all the way up to Canada. But those are also formed by plate tectonics. So this relationship for me to go from a sediment in the bay to something like that, these connections are kind of easy. They can sort of like look through time, geologic time, and make those connections. And the ship has always been kind of the perfect metaphor for this idea of transformation, because the land is constantly evolving, albeit in a time frame that we may not be very aware of, but it has evolved so much. I'm sure we've heard about plate tectonics and seafloor spreading and all those things. So those relationships have been at the base of my work, and these glass planes that are just kind of a newer part to sort of segment these works and create fault planes and create displacements. So that idea of displacement is a sort of another metaphor that's both actual in terms of geology, but also in terms of many other sort of metaphorical ideas that the ship as well embodies. So I think that's probably, I can answer questions later.
Thank you. Now I'd like to share the work of Judith Belzer with you. Judith Belzer is a Bay Area artist. She actually spends half the year on the East Coast, and that's where she is today. And in her work, she speaks to, she started out in her painting looking very closely at the earth and almost at a microscopic level, and now things have grown to on a very large scale. In this piece here, Edgelands, the work speaks to that convergence of the man-made land and the natural land. So the developed land and the undeveloped land. And in that convergence, there's often a lot of friction, energy, and confusion sometimes, or chaos between the developed and the undeveloped world. And then in this piece here, this one's half empty, half full. She is looking at the dams. The artist, she tells us that around 2016, she started thinking a lot about dams and about how this part of the United States, where there are a lot of dams in the Southwest, are becoming obsolete. As we moved west in our Manifest Destiny, which both of these are kind of a critique of, people have developed the land with this kind of hubris, this kind of arrogance even, to think that we can take the land and control it. And a lot of these dams that have been built to gather water to go, grow things where they don't belong, things that aren't supposed to be grown in the desert, to create cities and places that really can't support a city. They're going to become obsolete because soon there won't be enough water to fill them. And they're not something that can be removed from the earth. The dams will just be a monument to our arrogance. So I invite you to read the artist's quotes too, because she has other things. There's other things to gain from that. So here is a work of Bill Fontana. Bill Fontana is a Bay Area artist. He is a sound sculptor or a sound artist, and he's created these sound sculptures based on the ambient sounds that are there. He says that he believes there's always music to be heard if you're listening, or you know how to capture that sound. So what he did with his work is he has these small listening devices that, in both of these pieces, the desert piece and also the sequoia piece, he buries them in the earth, for instance, in the sequoia piece, and it captures the sound that the sequoia tree hears traveling through the earth, and you can hear the sound of a river that runs nearby. In this other desert piece, he placed these accelerometers into the sand, which nobody had done before, and he found that the sound that the desert makes inside of itself is much like the ocean sound. And so he gathers all these sounds up, and then he transports them to the listening site, the sculpture site, where this sound creates a sculpture of place. Hopefully I'm making that clear. He has another piece, and this might make it even more clear. He has this recent work in Paris, in Notre Dame Cathedral, where he's placed these listening devices in all 9 bells of the cathedral. And there was a fire there, and right now they're busy restoring it and bringing it back to life. Well, the accelerometers capture the ambient sounds of the city and of life in Paris, and it creates this kind of eerie, kind of spiritual ambient music of the city. So, and that is heard in the Centre Pompidou that's going on right now. So, Bill Fontana, and I think we'll turn this back on when everything's going again, and you can go experience the sound sculpture of the desert and the forest. Now, you guys are probably getting tired of hearing me talk about all this. This is the work of Sarah Sense. Sarah Sense is now back in California. She grew up in Northern California. She went to Chico State and then went back east Parsons for her MFA. She creates these woven works that incorporate photographs, writing, and the words of her grandmother and herself to create portraits of identity and memory. And she uses the weaving techniques of her Chitimacha and Choctaw people, which is her heritage, to create this work. They both, in these 2 pieces from this series, the pictures are of Ireland and Germany, and there's even some text in here too, with her writing about this experience of being Native American, and then there's some German in her family, and then she was living in Ireland, and she had just given birth to her son, whose father is also from the UK. And so she contemplates how the land makes you, the water and the food that she's eaten when she was pregnant, to her made her son Irish too, because he comes from that land. And so this piece might help us all contemplate who we think we are, our identity, how we base that on where we live, and maybe where we come from. To introduce you to another artist right now, Linda Simmel is here. She's a Sonoma-based artist, and she's created these etchings, and I'm going to let you speak about that. This is Linda Simmel.
Hi. Well, thank you, Marianne, so much. I'm so excited and thrilled to be included in this show. I look forward to exploring it when it's not so many people.
Yeah.
So these are photo etchings that were taken with my iPhone when I was on the train traveling from Berlin to Luxembourg. And I've heard, like a few other people in the show, they don't seem autobiographical, but they actually are. They're kind of an investigation into a larger project that's called the Hiking Club, which is reverie about my father who wandered the forests in and around Berlin and in Germany, and he was in this hiking club, and they would talk about a new world order, the Weimar Republic, and they had great hope, and then that hope collapsed, and we all know the history. So I was thinking of these trees that have been witnessed throughout that period of time, and of course they're still there, and the link that they provide between the two generations and periods of time. And so it's a photo etching, and then there's pencil that on top of it. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Linda. Actually, another installation we have. This work is by Victoria Samboneris. We also have a video, so I guess the best place for me to stand is maybe. So this is a photo installation. Victoria Samboneris is a photographer. She's based in New York, and every year part of her practice is she travels across the United States. She sometimes camps even on the top of her car, and she photographs the beauty of the land. She photographs the damage to the land of extraction and people enjoying the land, and small landmarks that probably not very many people know are there. And this composition here is based on her work from a trip last year where she visited the desert Southwest. She took thousands and thousands of photographs and provided 288 of them for this installation. So she had done something similar at the Ammon Carter Museum, and shipped these photos, and we put a piece of magnetic flexible material underneath it and screwed it to the wall, and then mounted these 288 photographs based on a grid she gave us. She's numbered them and created the whole thing. So this is all the artist's intention where everything's placed. They kind of remind me of, remember when we used to take pictures and get the film developed and you have like a million little pictures? It reminds me of, a travel trip. When you look at each one of them, you'll see where we've impacted the land, where we've, created roads and railways and aqueducts and mines, places that have been developed and abandoned. So invite you to explore that. And then similarly, oh look, there's some excavation extraction going on here. This is a video she made of a trip across the United States, and it's kind of from the perspective of the highway, which we can all relate to that too. A lot of times when we travel somewhere, we experience the land or place by driving, and you'll see trucks on the road, and on the audio that you can listen to, you can hear everything that you're traveling through. And finally, we have this piece here by Amalia Mesa Banks. She's a California-based artist, a Bay Area native, and she is really one of my art historian heroes, and an incredible, innovative woman artist. She has a show right now in San Francisco at SF MoMA, so I encourage you to see that. But this piece here is a print where she's taken different pieces of work that she's researched. There's an Albert Bierstadt painting. There's a botanical drawing made by some of the Spanish colonizers, and a botanical print of a native plant indigenous to place. And the work is about a lot of things, but essentially it's a commentary on the land. And a lot of times we think that when we see wide open spaces that at some point we used to think that, oh, that's ours for the taking, it's ours for the conquering, it's ours for the exploring and staking our claim. But in every case, the land is not empty. The land is always has the presence of the people who were there before us. It has the presence of history and of time, and our human impact on the land is always evolving and changing. But we may have wars, we may build things, we may take things, but people and our activities come and go, but really it's the land that remains. So I encourage you to explore everything in the exhibit, and please let me know if you have questions, and thank you so much for being here today and for your support.